I am doing Stephen's 5-question tag. One of these questions or things you have to do involves singing. So I'm going to apologise for that now. I'm really sorry about the noise you're going to hear in a moment. So here we go with question number 1. Sing the first line of your favourite carol. Well, the first line of this is 4 words, so that's hardly worth it. So I'm going to sing the first verse. So the song or the hymn that I like the most is Silent Night. The reasoning behind this is just as a child, it's one of those songs I sang and I liked. But then in the sort of early-ish bit of the 1970s, one Christmas my sister bought me a couple of Simon & Garfunkel albums, and one of them was Parsley, Sage, Rosemary and Thyme. And on there, the very last track is Simon & Garfunkel singing Silent Night. Intertwined with them singing Silent Night is an American newsreader of the time being 1966, 67, just reading the script of the news. So he's talking about the Vietnam War, President Johnston, civil rights, Martin Luther King, all them kind of things. He's talking about them both over the singing and underneath the singing. So it's like really moving, because you've got this lovely carol, and then you've got all this talk of war and death and disaster, and it just sort of meshes together really nicely. And I do like that song. It always just reminds me of back, when I was a kid, back in the 70s. So I like 60s music even back then. That shows how sad I've always been years behind. But more recently, I also love the way that Sinead O'Connor sings this carol. If you haven't heard it, you should go and look for it on YouTube, because it is beautiful. I like her voice anyway, but her version of this is just beautiful. So from the sublime to the ridiculous. Here I go. I've got the words here because I'm not too sure, and again I'm really sorry about this. And here we go. Right, Christopher. Right, here we go. Silent night, holy night, all is calm, all is bright, round yon virgin mother and child, holy infant, so tender and mild, sleep in heavenly peace, sleep in heavenly peace. I'm sorry about that. Oh dear. So, as I say, from the sublime to the ridiculous. On to question number 2. Eggnog, spiked or plain. As a kid, I used to love it, and I think my dad used to let me have like a tiny amount of alcohol in there. But as for now, it'd have to be like soaked in alcohol for me to want to get anywhere near it. It's just like thick and gloopy and yuck. So no, not now. I wouldn't touch it. As a kid, when I was living with my parents, they used to let us have these. I don't know if you probably didn't even have them in America, like little tiny bottles like that. It was called Baby Sham, and it was like I I don't know, like a cheap wine that was made of, or like a cheap champagne made of pears. But it was for like women and kids, and but it was. I always thought I was really sophisticated drinking that. I used to love that. I thought they'd stopped making it actually, but I saw someone actually buying some in the supermarket today. I nearly got some, and I thought, oh no, I can't be bothered. But it had to eggnog would have to be soaked in alcohol for me to touch it these days. Question number 3: did you hang up stockings when you were growing up? Yes, but only when I was really young, to be quite honest. And in them was the same kind of things that Steve mentioned, like nuts, and we had tangerine, tangerines, don't I? Tangerines? No, satsumas, same thing. And it'd be like bits of chocolate, and Steve mentioned them little round balls in silver paper. Used to them and all, and Santa Claus, all that kind of silly things. But only when I was really young, as I say, to be quite honest, did we have them. Next question is: did Santa ever disappoint you? Not really. I wanted a bike and I didn't get it the year I wanted it, but I got it a year later, so yes there. I suppose the only other one I can actually remember was for 2 or 3 years I kept asking for a, I don't suppose you had them in America, but they were called Action Men. So they'll be like the G.I. Joes over there, but they're like dolls for boys, soldiers, and I wanted this Action Man for it must have been 2 or 3 years, and I never know why they didn't get it for me, but I always wanted that, and I got it eventually, but it's like, I say 2 or 3 years after I'd asked for it, so I don't know why they wouldn't let me have it, but I got it in the end, so, or Santa gave it to me in the end. Next question is, or the last question is, ever have any Christmas disasters? Apart, if we've had a few illnesses, that's been more recently than when I was a child. But the only real disaster that I can remember is when I was quite small. We used to have a real Christmas tree, and apparently, I really don't remember this at all, but I was playing about in the tree, and I got one of the pine needles in my eye, and I was screaming like some banshee, and they were trying to hold me down and flush this out with milk or whatever I think it's milk they said they were trying to use to flush this pine needle out, and I wouldn't let them. I was screaming and howling, and I ended up having to get dragged down the local hospital so that they could take it out. So that was the only disaster that I can actually remember at Christmas, or on Christmas Day anyway. So there you go. Thanks very much, Steve, for tagging me. That's very nice of you, as always. Always like doing them. I'm now meant to do my least favourite carol, which I don't know the words to. I've forgotten to write the words for it down. So what I'm going to do, I'll turn this off, and then I'll come back on and sing my least favourite carol or tune. So I'll say thank you very much, and see you all later, and I shall be back in a second. So this is the final bit of of Steve's tag, the carol I dislike the most. I don't actually dislike it that much. It's more when I was a 7 or 8 year old in junior school. I believe it or not, I used to be in the choir. And I remember having to sing descant to this, and I hated it at the time. So, anyway, here we go. I'll tell you what it is beforehand, just in case you can't work out what it is. So it's Once in Royal David City. I will do the first verse. Once in Royal David City stood in a manger for his bed. Mary was that mother mild, Jesus Christ, her little child. We'll be back. Oh dear. So there you go. That's my that's the completed Stevie tag. Thanks very much for tagging us. Was there anything else? No, I don't think so. I'll speak to you all later. Bye.